welcome to Resonate the Sound. I'm Chris Honigan. You know, a couple weeks back on this program, myself and Associate Pastor and Women's Pastor Pam Hovis talked about faith. And we talked about it using the illustration of the size of a mustard seed. And Pam brought out something that was really, really powerful. She said, yeah, it may be small, but it packs a powerful punch. One of those powerful punches will be demonstrated in today's broadcast, courtesy of our special guest, Tyler Boone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's one thing to have faith, it's another to have unfathomable faith. Let's go resonate, shall we?
So if I'm too loud, you're going to have to tell me. I'm a naturally loud person, so I'm not used to talking with a microphone. What we're going to go over tonight is unfathomable faith. So as you can tell by the title of this, we're going to talk about faith. Faith is one of the most important principles as a follower of Christ. So when people hear the word faith, they instantly think God, they think Jesus, they think religion, all the things like that. That being said, faith is a word that is so often used and talked about that I feel like we forget the true meaning. So start off with the word unfathomable. The definition is incapable of being understood or impossible to measure the extent of. And then faith is defined tons of ways. Merriam-Webster defines faith as an allegiance to duty or a person. Faith is defined as complete trust. Dictionary.com defines faith as confidence or trust in a person or thing. Basically, so what I'm getting at is no matter how you define faith, it all boils back down to loyalty and trust. All right, so faith, as I said, it's something we just go through the motions with sometimes. We're all followers of Christ. We know what faith is. We know how we should live. But since it's so often talked about, sometimes we don't really live how we should. We just go through the motions. So we all have faith, or at least a little faith. We're all here tonight, so there's something there. And we know it's everywhere in the Bible. But sometimes we forget to let our faith show as we should. So let's look at some numbers. The word faith is mentioned 336 times in the King James Version of the Bible. It is mentioned 458 times in the New International Version. I don't know about you guys, but I think that's a lot. And that is the word faith. I'm not talking about stories of faith. There are countless stories of faith in the Bible. There are chapters dedicated entirely to faith that may not mention the word. So if something is mentioned that much in the Bible, I feel like we should take it seriously. So let me tell you a short story about faith in my life. As some of you know, I'm in nursing school right now. I'm 24 years old, and I'm still in college because I tried creating my own path for most of my life instead of praying and figuring out what I should do. So one day I got tired of changing everything and realized, I should let God decide what I do with my life. So I prayed, and I felt like God led me to go to nursing school, which if you knew me beforehand, you would know that that was my last option. I always said I would never go to nursing school no matter who told me to. But God told me to, so I was like, all right, let me give it a try. So I did it, I applied, I got accepted. Well, the classes were supposed to be 4 days a week, which meant I could have days off so I could work, pay my bills, pay for my car, pay for my house, all that stuff. So things were going great. Well, and then I go to orientation. I'm super excited to start this next chapter in my life. God has a plan for me, and I know it. And the first thing they say is, we've changed the schedule, so you're going to be going 5 days a week now, which may not seem like a lot to some people, but my heart dropped. I had these plans. I knew that I was going to be at school 4 days a week, working 3 days a week. I'd have enough money to pay my bills, pay everything I needed, and not ever worry. And then they dropped this on me. So I didn't even pay any attention to anything else. On our first break, I just called my parents, and I'm rambling because, honestly, I was just confused. And, I told them about it, and all my parents would say, if you know my parents, they're super positive and always uplifting. They're just like, look, God has a plan. Don't you worry about it. So I was like, you know what, that's true, But I'm still confused. So I'm on my way to call my boss because they had worked around my school schedule for me. So I'm talking to God on the way out the door. I'm not mad or upset. I'm just a little confused, because I needed answers on what to do. So I just remember thinking, hey, God, look, there's a curveball, but you didn't see that one coming, I was like, what now? And then he shut me up real quick, y'all. Let me tell you. I explained the situation to my boss, and she said, well, Tyler, you're in luck. I'm in luck. How am I in luck, Because I have this job that I absolutely love, And then I have nursing school, which I feel like God has called me to do. And now I'm either going to have to quit my job so I can work somewhere else and get more hours, or I'm going to have to drop out of what God has led me to do. So I sit there quiet for a second, and I'm like, I'm in luck. I don't feel very lucky, to be honest. And my boss told me a position had just opened up that would work around my schedule. So all right, that's a good start, so I can still work here, but that doesn't help with my bills. Well, and then she tells me that this position, this contract that I can sign, comes with a raise of $6 an hour. So, I'm here, talking to God, hey, you see this curveball, Are you surprised too? Because I'm pretty surprised. And that's when I came to realize, no matter what happens in our daily lives, God's not taken by surprise. I was acting as if God was throwing a curveball too. I was acting as if God was saying, well, that's not the plan. What happens next? Just like I was. I was acting as if he should be taken by surprise just because I was. And in all reality, this curveball to me was a part of his plan all along. This was God testing my faith, and I failed tremendously. All right, let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Obviously, this is something I know I fell at. Pastor did a sermon last week about surrendering control. So if you're here to hear that, that's great because it kind of ties into this. So have you ever prayed to God to help you make a decision, or maybe even just for an answer to something, and then he tells you exactly what you need to do? He comes to you, maybe it's a sign, maybe he talks to you in your prayers, but he tells you exactly what he wants to do about your prayers. Well, he'll give you this clear answer, and then we use our own judgment to make the decision. So God's going to give us this, and then we think we find an easier path or just a little shortcut to our thing. So instead of taking what God has given us, we're like, hey, you know what? I'll handle this one on my own. I know I asked you for your advice, and I prayed to you, but let me take control of my life. So we choose to walk in our own judgment and our own sight when the Bible specifically tells us to walk by faith. So we feel like we have to be in control, but that's not how it works. Instead of walking with God, we jump ahead of God. We try to speed ahead of him and pass him, and then we get these plans for ourselves, and we never once ask God for anything in them. And then we hit a bump. Stops us dead in our tracks, and then we have to talk to God. We have to come to him and pray and admit, hey, I know I made these plans without you, but I figured I could just take control and you could bless this path that I created. I didn't do what you said, but I figured I'd make your job a little bit easier and just do it on my own, and you can bless me later. Well, now I need the blessings. So and it's honestly, it's an easy mistake to make. As humans, as flesh, we often just take the easy way out. It's something, when you actually think about it, it's the easiest thing to do. Living in faith is hard. It is. So we often choose to take this easy way out instead of following the path that God makes, just because his path seems confusing sometimes. We don't know what to do, but we have to remember something. The only things that happen in our life are the things that God allows. If something happens to you, it's because God has a reason for it to happen. We spend too much time trying to figure out exactly what is going to happen in our lives. We don't have to know what God's going to do to provide, when he's going to provide, where he's going to provide, but we do have to remember that he will provide. A prime example of this would be Daniel in the lion's den. We've all heard this story. So Daniel is under King Darius. He has 3 administrators, and Daniel's one of them, and he's the most respected. The other 2 administrators are they're very jealous of him. So the other 2 administrators are trying to get him in trouble, but they can't figure out how. So then they have an idea. They know that Daniel worships God. So they're like, all right, we're going to go to the king. So they went to him like, hey, how about you should make a decree that for the next 30 days, if anyone worships God or any other human other than you, you just throw them into the lion's den. That's the easiest way out because they know that Daniel's going to worship God. So the king was like, all right, sure, let's do it. So he did it, Well, obviously, just like they thought, Daniel goes home, and what does he do? He goes into his house, curtains wide open, right for everyone to see, and he prays 3 times a day, just like he would any other day, despite this law. So then the other guys, they go to the king and like, hey, didn't you just make that law that if someone prayed to you, they had to get thrown to the lion's den? Because Daniel is over there letting everyone see you disrespect him. He's just praying, and he don't even care. So the king couldn't go back on his law. He had to seal Daniel inside the lion's den, even though he didn't want to. He realized he was tricked. So actually, Scripture says he didn't want to do it. He didn't eat or sleep all night. And he went directly into the lion's den the next morning as soon as he saw light to check on Daniel. So he shouts down into the lions, and he's like, Daniel, did the God you were praying to save you? And here it comes. Daniel answers right back, yeah, he saved me. God sent angels to shut the mouth of these lions. So Daniel's immediately lifted out of here. Not a single wound on his body. Nothing has happened. He was locked in a den with lions all night. Have you ever been to the zoo and seen lions? Wild stuff. I ain't trying to be around them. So, he does it. And then some people might say, like, oh, well, had something to do with the lions. Let me tell you, that's not the case. The scripture goes on to tell you that the men who had the king do this, the other two administrators, the king threw them into the lion's den, and they didn't even make it to the floor of the den. They were overpowered by the lions before they ever reached the floor. Where Daniel spent an entire night with these lions, nothing happened. This is a prime example of walking by faith and not by sight. Because, if we use our own sight in this, Daniel's locked in a den with lions. If we use our own sight and not faith, this is a situation that couldn't possibly work out. How are you going to be locked in a den with lions all night and survive unless you have faith? So, but Daniel, a man of faith, knew he had done no wrong. He knew that God was going to protect him for serving him, even though it was temporarily illegal at this time. He knew that God had a much bigger plan for him. And this is what happened afterwards. Daniel chapter 6, verse 25 through 27. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever. And his kingdom, that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So just because of this act of faith, the king then makes a decree that all men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God. So his kingdom, every person in it went from having to not pray to a single God or any human other than him, to all having to worship the God of Daniel just by this one act of faith. One act of faith changed this entire nation. So let's look at other acts of faith in the Bible. Everyone knows the story of David versus Goliath. Goliath was over 9 feet tall. He's a giant. He had 125 pounds of armor. That's more than a lot of you weigh. So he had that much armor on his body. The entire Israelite army was terrified of him. Then here comes little old David, comes around and slays the giant, despite nobody believing in him. Sorry if I spoiled that for anybody, but that's how it goes. But there's one specific verse that I want to bring up, and it's 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 37. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. So whereas the entire Israelite army could not take out this giant, David goes to this giant and kills him with a slingshot because he knows that God is going to deliver him out of this. He has enough faith that this little man can go up to this giant and defeat him, whereas an entire army could not. All right, let's look at Noah's Ark. I'm only going to give a few verses of this because I don't want to lose your attention, and I know you've all heard this story. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 6, verses 12 through 17. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the width of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. So, God tells Noah that the earth is corrupt and filled with violence, so he's going to send a flood that's going to rid all the evil on earth. All of it. So he wants Noah to build an ark. And, you see in it, the length will be 300 cubits, the width 50 cubits, and the height 30 cubits. So I did some research, They don't know an exact amount of how much a cubit is, but they have a rough estimate. So this ark that Noah built was roughly 500 feet long, 85 feet wide, and 50 feet high. I want you to keep in mind that this is happening where they don't have cranes, they don't have power tools, they don't have heavy machinery. Noah spent 120 years building this ark because God told him to. Noah did everything God commanded him to do. An ark that would still be practically impossible to build today, Noah built by himself. And then what happened? Rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. Water flooded the earth for 150 days. And all living things that were not on this ark didn't survive. They didn't make it. All right, I'll just do one more. One of my favorite stories in the Bible involves Elijah. Before we get to my favorite, I'll give you a little background on him and how things went before mine. Elijah was a prophet of God. 1 Kings chapter 17 and 18 are full of stories involving Elijah. So in the beginning, God tells Elijah that no rain is going to fall in Israel for the next few years except at my word. Yeah. So God then tells Elijah to hide in a ravine and drink from a brook. Yeah. He tells him that ravens are going to supply him with food. So Elijah is a prophet of God. He does not question God. He just listens. He goes straight down to that ravine and gets water from the brook. And guess what happens? Ravens brought him bread and meat every morning and every evening to eat. So Elijah did this for a while, and then the brook dries up, and then God comes straight to Elijah, and he says, I want you to go to the city, and there's going to be a widow there, and she's going to feed you. Don't you worry about it. Doesn't question him again. Elijah's like, all right, you said it, I'll do it. So he does it. So he gets to the city, and he gets to the city gate, and he sees a woman there just gathering sticks. Well, that's her. That's the widow. So he walks up to her and is like, hey, I need some food. Can I have some water and a loaf of bread? But she says she doesn't have any. And, Elijah, obviously, is a prophet of God, is not worried. So she says that she only has a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. But she needed the food for herself and for her son. Yeah. But Elijah told her to make the bread anyway and said that the flour and oil will not run dry until God sends rain. Yeah. Right. So she listens. Elijah explains he's a prophet of God. She does what he says. And sure enough, neither ran dry. So she feeds herself, her child, and Elijah every day. Well, later on in the story, her child becomes sick. The widow is just distressed, obviously. Her child stopped breathing. So she comes to Elijah, like, you come to me to remind me of my sins, and then, you kill my son. And Elijah, as a prophet of God, says, give me your son. So she does. He takes her son to his arms, lays him down, and prays to God. And what does God do? Brings this boy right back to life. God immediately answered this prayer. So Elijah followed everything that God had him do, from going to a ravine, drinking from a brook, having ravens give him food. That runs out. So he goes to a city, meets a random widow, she feeds him. And then he has enough faith in God and in his prayers that this boy is brought back to life. That's not even my favorite story. Let's get to it now. It's a good one. So then God tells Elijah, go to Israel and speak to Ahab, and then I will bring rain to the land. So at this time, Ahab's the king of Israel, but he didn't worship God. He worshipped Baal, a false god. His wife was killing all the prophets of our God. So he and his people worshipped him, and Elijah just says, all right, hey, let's meet at the top of Mount Carmel, and I want you to bring your prophets to the top of this mountain. I want you to bring 2 bulls, okay? So here's Elijah's plan. He says, I want you to cut these bulls into pieces, and I want you to put it on wood, but don't set fire to them. I want you to call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and whichever God answers with fire is the true God. So, Ahab and all their prophets, they called on God from morning until evening, all day, continued to call on him. Guess what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So Elijah's getting a kick out of it. He's over there, just jumping around because he knows, there's one true God, and that's not him. Right. So now let's read 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 30 through 39. And Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. Yeah. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bullock in pieces and laid him on the wood and said, fill 4 barrels with water and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. Yeah. And he said, do it again. Do it a second time. And they did it a second time. He said, you know what? Do it a third time. And they did it a third time. Yeah. So the water ran about the altar, and he filled the trench with water as well. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah, the prophet, came near and said, Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and thou hast turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, he is the God, the Lord, he is the God. Y'all, that's powerful. So it says 2 measures of seed. That's about 4.5 gallons, actually. So 4.5 gallons, they're spread around there. Just put it into context. So Elijah had enough faith to not only perform this sacrifice in front of prophets of a fake God, but to also add elements to it to prove that our God is the one true God. Yeah. Israel is in a drought, and Elijah had the people pour 12 barrels of water onto the wood and sacrifice. The thing I want you all to learn from these stories is simple. Faith prevails when logic fails. Did it seem logical for David to fight Goliath, a giant, with a slingshot? Did it seem logical for Noah to spend more than 100 years building an ark that would still be difficult to build today with modern technology? For a flood that's going to wipe out all the life on earth? Did it seem logical for Elijah to hide in a ravine, waiting for ravens to feed him, then go to a city and be fed by a widow that he doesn't know? Did it seem logical for him to put a bull on an altar, dump 12 full barrels of water on it, and then call on God to set fire to it? If you say yes to any of this, then we think differently. When we pray to God and he answers our prayers, we have to realize sometimes logic goes out the window. That's right. When you have faith, it isn't about logic. God is going to give you an answer, and you have to walk in faith. That's right. Do not let your own logic prevail over faith. That's right. So these people, they did these things because they knew without a doubt that God would deliver, and they had unfathomable faith. That's right. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So whereas we read the definitions earlier, we know what they said. The Bible defines faith as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's right. These miracles were early evidence of God, and it made people realize who God really is. You know, I'm not saying we have to slay a giant, build an ark, or sacrifice a bull, but can you imagine how many people we could bring into this church with that type of faith, though? Yeah, that's true. I come to this church, and I see all of you people. You have such faith and such excitement worshiping every single week. I see people who love God. I see people who have witnessed miracles right here in this church. Yeah. I've been to plenty of churches in my life, honestly, and I can assure you that I've never been to a church that worships the Lord as passionately as this one. And it's truly amazing, but I want you to think about this. How often do we spread the word of these miracles that happen here? How often do we leave this church with the faith to make miracles occur at work, on the streets, at the store, no matter where it may be? How often do we do that? And how many of these miracles that I just told you about happen inside of a church? So my challenge for everyone tonight, you know, myself included, we have to start leaving this place with the same excitement and the same faith in God that we exhibit inside this church every single week. Absolutely. We have to use this faith and this excitement in our daily lives for everyone to see. Yes, sir. If we don't live outside of this church how we do inside of this church, how are we going to bring people in here? That's right. How are we going to have people saved if we come in here and we worship and we have such faith and such excitement worshiping the Lord, but then we go out of here and it's gone until next Sunday or next Wednesday or next family night, you know? How are we supposed to change the lives of others if all we're worried about is the faith we use when all the people in the church are together? That's something that, we all struggle with. We often focus on the people inside of the church, whereas these miracles happen and we all see it, but we want to save people. We have to show people these miracles outside of this church, this faith outside of the church. We have to bring people who are lost into this church to be found. So, we need to show people just by our actions and interactions the love we have for God. We don't need to depend on our words. We need to live in a way that these people can see who our Lord truly is. I'm not sure if you heard about Paul and Silas. They worshiped God in prison until there was an earthquake and everyone's chains fell off. Paul and Silas influenced people to be saved in a place where most people wouldn't even consider worshiping God. I've never been to prison, so I don't know what it's like, but I imagine not many people are thanking God in prison. So they had people saved inside of prison. That's wild, y'all. That's wild. So if your faith isn't where it should be, or it's been slacking, no matter what it may be, tonight is the night that you can take your first step to renewed faith. And I'm not here to burst anyone's bubble, but the first step is honestly the easiest. It's easy to feel moved by a sermon or moved by your own reading and want to start worshiping God. But you have to realize when Jesus moves you to take that first step, he's going to create a path for you.
That's right.
But you have to follow it. And if you don't believe me, think about Peter. You know the story of Peter. Peter, they're all in a boat. They see Jesus walking on water. They thought he was a ghost, but Jesus reassured him. It's just him, So then Peter says, Jesus, if it's you, tell me to come to you in the water. And you know what Jesus said? One word, come. So you know what? He did. Peter got out of the boat and he began to walk on water. Let me repeat that if you did not hear me. Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on water. So he's doing it, and then he sees the storm. The wind picks up. He loses faith. And you know what happens when he loses faith? He plummets into that water. And he's walking to God. He hasn't made it there yet. But you know what happens as soon as he hits the water? Jesus is immediately there to lift him up. And you know what he says? You have little faith, why did you doubt? So if you're struggling with your faith, or if you don't feel good enough, that's okay. It happens to all of us. We all fail. But you have to realize it's not a shame to come to God and ask him to renew your faith. The second that you ask God to renew your faith and to come back into your life, he will immediately be there to answer these prayers. It's up to you to follow this path. Stop trying to take control of your own life and let him control you. So, once he starts you on this journey of faith, don't question it. Stop asking God why he's doing things and just do them. Walk in faith. Stop using your own mind and your own sight to control how you live. It will seem easier to create your own alternate route. I'll admit that, it will, but I can assure you it's not, because you're not going to end up where you want to be. God will allow miracles to happen in your life if you just follow the path that he specifically creates for you and you never doubt him. Amen. Now, I know that was short. I know that's sweet. I got a little bit too rattled up, talked a little fast, and I apologize for that. But I want you all to pray. I don't care where you pray. I don't care how you pray. If you want to come to the altars, come to the altars. If you want to sit in your seat, sit in your seat. If you want to pray alone, pray alone. If you want to pray together, pray together. It does not matter. I just want you all to remember the faith that these others exhibited and pray for the strength and the ability to do the same, to influence as many lives as these people did, because one act of faith can fill this church up. So if you struggle to faith, I want you to pray about that. Tonight could be a new beginning in this church, and I want you to all go to God with your worries right now and renew your mind so we can begin to allow miracles to happen right here in our lives. Absolutely. So I'm going to let you all pray on your own. Like I said, if you want to pray in your seat, you pray in your seat. If you want to pray at the altars, pray in the altars. If you want to pray alone, together. Do whatever you feel moved to do.
Hey, thank you so much for watching Resonate the Sound. We indeed pray and love to encourage you that, hey, let this broadcast not only resonate to you, but resonate to any and everybody around you or anybody far away from you. Hey, we love to have you here. We got all the info and everything out, all available on social media platforms and Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but also, most importantly, our website, resonatechurchar.org. That's the #1 place you go for any and everything Resonate. Go to our website, resonatechurchar.org. And hey, we'll love to see you right back here next week for another great Resonate the Sound. And until then, for our senior pastors, Brian and Carmen Adams, for our entire staff and everyone here at Resonate, I'm Chris Honnigan. Not only do we tell you to resonate the sound, but we do encourage you to show love, give peace, and resonate Jesus. We'll see you right back here next week, 9 p.m. Eastern. Have a good night, everybody.